Hi, I'm Milena, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my June wrap-up. I have this little pile of books to talk to you about today and a few audiobooks as well. In the month of June I also published my Women's Shortlist Prize vlog and I will leave that in the description down below. I won't mention those books here because I've already talked about them at length. Together with Mary from Mary Among Stories, I hosted a 24-hour readathon for which we had prompts for classic literature, and I read these 4 works for that readathon. So let's start with those 4 works. The first one I want to discuss is John Keats. I heard most of this little black classic, but it just really wasn't for me. It was overly mythical and overly romantic, too much purple prose, too flowery. Just really wasn't for me. I was incredibly bored while reading this because you have just this simple tale that I think Keats kind of used and then turned into a poem, and I know that a lot of people love it, but I was just so bored. I didn't find the poetry beautiful in any way or form, not that it is necessary for poetry, but there was just no added value for me in how the tale was told in a way that Keats did it. So just not for me, unfortunately. What really was for me were the short stories by Charles Dickens, and I have been known to say that I'm not the biggest fan of Dickens, but I'm definitely not giving up on him because I really enjoyed these 2 short stories. So we have the first one called The Winglebury Duel, which is the cover title. This is very dramatic, very saucy, about a woman eloping and a man who is, I think, supposed to be part of a duel. It's very adventurous and there's a lot of hilarious miscommunication. I gave that one 4.5 stars, which wow. And then the second one was the steam excursion, about a bunch of rich people who go on this excursion and it goes very wrong and it's hilarious. It is very funny. I like it when Dickens is funny. So this was a great success for me. Would highly recommend, if you have this collection, to pick this one up. If you have not heard before of the Little Black Classics, they are a collection of 80 short works by various classic authors. I read Where Angels Fear to Tread by Ian Forster. This was a book that I mainly listened to through audio, and I have to say, I have forgotten what it is about, so it didn't make much of an impression on me. It is set in Italy. Oh, now I remember. Yes, this is a very short novel, but it entails the entire life of our main heroine, Lilia Harrington. And she goes on vacation to Italy. If you've read A Room with a View, it might be a little bit reminiscent of that novel. Once in Italy, she starts her life there. We follow her family members as well as they try to help her in different ways or kind of work against her. It is quite funny, but also really dramatic. I thought a lot of things were in this novel. A lot of time passed and I did really like it. I appreciated it once I read it, but knowing that I already forgot most of it kind of shows that it's a bit of a forgettable one. Definitely not one of the top novels by Ian Forster, but I had a good time reading this in one go. The characters were great, like everything was fine in this novel. It's definitely just not Ian Forster's best work. It is a great novel, I think, if you're new to classics, because it's very accessible and it's quite action-packed in a way. And then my favorite of the 24-hour readathon, to no one's surprise, was Recitatif by Toni Morrison. So this is a short story, but a really short story. It's only 30 pages long, about a friendship between 2 women. They meet each other in foster care when they are, I think, both 8 years old, and we follow them as they grow older. This was an experiment for Toni Morrison. This was her only short story that was published, and after reading the introduction by Zadie Smith, I think it was actually the only short story she ever wrote, and this was an experiment for her how to write race in characters. These 2 main characters talk a lot about race. We know that it is important to them and we know that they're both a different race, but we never get the specifics. And the introduction gave a lot of insight, I think, into the way that Toni Morrison wanted to write that, and it's just a very interesting reading experience. How you perceive a certain piece of writing, looking at the race of the author, is all very interesting. If you're going to read this, which I would highly recommend because it was a glowing 5-star, definitely also read the introduction because it will give you very good context. Heading over to romance, I read Infamous by Lex Croucher, which was also on my TBR if you've seen my TBR board. I have similar feelings that I had when I read Reputation, which is Lex Croucher's previous novel, where I really enjoyed the idea of the plot, I enjoyed the world, I enjoyed especially the characters, but I just don't really love Lex Croucher's writing. Pacing feels a bit off and it's just somehow a very slow read, even though the plot and the characters make it so intriguing, and I never feel hooked to keep on reading, which is a big problem in this genre for me. When I read romance or historical romance, I read for the enjoyment, so I definitely don't want to read to be a chore. Having said that, if you don't have that issue with this author, then I think you will love the characters, because we meet two best friends. The book opens with them practicing kissing on each other, and it already really sets the sapphic tone for the entirety of the novel. One of them wants to be a writer and one of them wants more a domestic life, and this is where they start to clash. And when they go on this kind of retreat together, or retreat on this holiday together, things start to explode. And I just really like the characters. They are amazing. I would love to see this as an adaptation, because I think my only issue with this novel was that I just didn't really enjoy the writing, but all the other stuffs were amazing. It had some hints of dark academia. I loved all the art parts in this book. I love it when painting or sculpting or writing, anything, is a part of a novel. Basically, this should have been my perfect read. It's just I didn't love the writing. So I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. A book that was on the Women's Prize long list I just really wanted to read, so I picked it up and I read it right away, is The Bandit Queens. This was great. I just finished it this morning and I gave it 4 stars. This is about a group of women in an Indian village who share a loan. Like, you have these micro loans and they all use it for their small business. Our main character Geeta has been left by her husband about 5 years ago, and everyone believes that she has killed him, but she knows that she hasn't. He just disappeared. But when women start to believe that she actually killed her husband, they ask her for help to kill theirs. So it's basically women killing men in a way. It's really funny. This is a laugh out loud kind of book, even though some themes in this book are like big content warnings, and it even nauseated me at parts to read. There's a lot of assault in this book in different forms. I think that is a credit to the writing, where the author wants this, I think, to be a comedic piece of writing in its core, but have these very difficult topics discussed as well. The message of this book is that women only are allowed as much power as men are willing to give them in the scenario of these women. I liked almost everything about this book. I just think the way the plot was paced wasn't perfect. There were points where I really wanted to keep on reading, and there were points where it was really quite slow, and I don't think we had the right pulses at the right moment in the book, which is maybe a little bit of a vague way of saying that this really feels like a debut novel, but I'm expecting really great things from this author. I enjoyed the characters a lot. I think it was really clever how we were always in Geeta's head, but we noticed through reactions of people she knew that Geeta is not the smartest person, and that was just really funny when she tries to be clever and someone tells her like, people say you're acting really weird. There's a romance plot in this book as well, which I loved with all of my heart, because there are just two people who don't have a glorious life, who don't have a glorious past, but are just really connected towards each other. And it's the kind of romance that makes you believe in love again, especially when you're reading this book when you really don't believe in love because of all the shitty husbands. I would highly recommend this. Definitely remember the contents warnings for different forms of abuse, because that can be a really tough read if you're not ready for it, but otherwise I'll promise you, you will laugh out loud a few times while reading this book. I am on a roll when it comes to finishing series, because I finished the Blackthorn and Grimm series and I'm so sad. But I'm mainly sad because I am a little bit pissed with Juliet Marillier, which is not something I thought I would ever say. I think she did the characters justice, but not me. Like, I wanted more of certain things. And I think something that I know that I don't love in Juliet Marillier, and I think she does it in her other novels as well, is when you have a series that the books all have subplots that take so much time of the novel, and we don't get to spend as much time as we would like with our main characters, so with Blackthorn and Grimm. And that made me really quite sad, because there was so much still to figure out between them, and it just felt rushed in the end. There was just so much that you wanted to happen for these characters, and we got so little of it. And I feel unsatisfied after finishing this. Of course, I still enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of magic in this book, and I liked the subplot in general. I like all the subplots from these books in general, but they take away too much of the time of the characters that I actually want to read about. So I'm not too happy with the ending of this one. Little bit sad, and honestly in a way that I don't think I will gravitate towards Juliet Marillier's series. I would love to read a standalone. I don't know if she wrote those. I don't trust her anymore with a 1500 pages. I gave this a 3.5 star, which is so disappointing considering the first one, Dreamer's Pool, was a 5 star. And then another book I read on a whim very recently was the Jane Austen Society. I have to be so careful with these titles because you have so many books with these kind of titles. You have the Jane Austen Book Club, the Jane Austen Project. But I read the Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. Yes, I gave this like 3.5, maybe a 4 star, and it really reminded me, maybe a little bit too much, of the Guernsey and Potato Peel Pie Society, which is one of my favorite historical fictions. Of course I like the premise, and we are set just after the Second World War in a small town in England, and we meet various characters. One of our main characters is a doctor, another one is a teacher, and we follow a movie star, and they're all obsessed with, can you guess, Jane Austen, which, to be fair, is the reason I read this book. Most of the book is set in this small town, which I found really, really lovely. I like the interactions and the relationships a lot. Some of the characters' stories were kind of interwoven with Jane Austen's story. Especially persuasion is very prevalent in this book. And I think that may have been one of my favorite storylines. Also, the writing was fine. The narration, if you've watched North and South, the miniseries, you know why I love the narration by Richard Armitage. Ooh, that's a difficult name to say. Richard Armitage. Richard Armitage. Never mind. Photo. His narration was heavenly. It was really, really good. But my one concern kind of with this novel was that the things the characters said and did, it didn't always make sense in the context of the characters, and the believability kind of suffered because of that. I feel like some characters behaved in a way that a character in that situation in that time would not. When the believability of a novel suffers, it can ruin it so quickly. I do think it kind of picked up again for me once the characters spent more time together in a group and their behavior became a bit more natural. But this definitely is not a new favorite. It's enjoyable, don't get me wrong, but this is not the kind of book I would really recommend a lot because I just don't think it's that good. I'm sorry. So that was it for the month of June, and of course the month of July is going to be insanity because I'm going to do 30 books in 30 days. If you wanna see the TBR video, I will leave it in the description down below. I hope to see you in one of those vlogs. For now, let me know if you've read any of these books, and if you agree or disagree with me, I would love to know. I hope that you have a lovely day or evening, and I hope to see you in another video. Doei!